So we're jumping in. I can't believe we're in week 7. We're in week 7. So, and we get spring break before 8 weeks. So just keep that in mind. But we're going to start week 7 with mindful relationships, awareness, and the science of relationships. So this is very exciting information. This is relationship science, and it's based on a man named John Gottman's research, who's up at the University of Washington. And John had a love lab. This is an adorable little couple. And he researched relationships. Now, the Gottman Institute is quite something. It's a place where they would put couples and groups, dyads of people into an apartment-like setting and have them talk and relate. Meanwhile, they're covered with electrodes that are measuring all kinds of things, from their heart rate to how much they're sweating. And scientists are measuring this, and there's also cameras there, but they stay for a while so the couples get comfortable. And the cameras record what the couple's doing, and the scientists are watching, and they're coding the facial expressions for positive and negative facial expressions. And after a while of doing this, being able to predict human behavior is very difficult because we're so diverse. But Gottman's lab and researchers were able to predict which couples are going to divorce in 5 years with 90% accuracy. And I think they've gotten it up to 95% accuracy, which is stunning, just shocking data. And they were able to do that because they looked for behavior patterns of what they refer to as masters and disasters of relationship. And these behavior patterns are the case regardless of what kind of relationship we're in, whether it's romantic, friendships, siblings, family, co-workers, all relationships, classmates, all relationships are based on these same principles. So we're going to be looking at these 7 different principles. But first, let's meet John Gottman. And this is Gottman talking about the magic relationship ratio, which is one of the first principles. The magic relationship ratio, which is 5 to 1. So I put that in as a video and it didn't work as a video. So Gottman, we'll bring it up. The slow way. Here we go. John Gottman on the magic relationship ratio. He's a sweetie, and there are lots of Gottman videos if you want to listen to him more.
About what it is we learned that allows us to predict divorce or stability with very high accuracy. The first thing we found was that if you take a look at the ratio of positive stuff during conflict, things like interest, asking questions, being nice to one another, being kind, being affectionate, being empathetic, and you look at all the negative stuff like criticism, hostility, anger, hurt feelings, and you take the ratio of positive to negative. In relationships that stay together, that ratio turns out to be 5 to 1. There's 5 times as many positive things going on in relationships that work as negative. So that's an interesting equation. And it sort of suggests that if you do something negative to hurt your partner's feelings, that you have to make up for it with 5 positive things. So the equation is not balanced in terms of positive and negative. Negative has a lot more ability to inflict pain and damage than positive things have to heal and bring you closer.
Okay, huge point. Even if you just remembered this one and lived your life by this one, it would make an enormous difference. Now, you know why that's the case. We have to have 5 positive interactions to offset every negative interaction. Why? Because the negativity bias of the brain. That one negative interaction has grooved in the same amount as 5 positive ones. And this can kind of give you a hint of what it takes to keep a positive inner world going for yourself too. You also need to cultivate, or we need to cultivate, positive experiences for ourselves within in order to counteract stressors and troubles that we go through, challenges that we face and go through. So these 5 positive things are really small things. They don't have to be big things. They can be small things. They can be expressions of interest. They can be any kind of positive connection, a pat on the back, a hug, a compliment, a warm comment, or, hey, I was thinking about you today, any kind of little thing, you know, little fist bump. Rituals that people do, like fist bumps, are very bonding for us. They're a form of play. And, you know, when you have a little thing that the two of you do a particular kind of way, you can create rituals. You can start adding rituals to your life, like always saying love ya when you leave, things like that. But just being aware, okay, we had a little spat. Now I'm going to offset that by being lovingly attentive to my friend or my coworker or whoever it is, in order to help offset the negative, the over grooving that the brain automatically does because of the negativity bias, right? Which you're so fully aware of. So the magic relation ratio is one to keep in mind, because we can be proactive about that. Once we know that, we don't have to fall prey to the negativity bias, which gets us to overscan for the negative too. That negativity bias is also what's getting you to pay more attention than you want to your partners or your friends or whoever, the negative traits, to overemphasize those. So we have to offset the negativity bias from that direction as well. So our relationships develop an emotional valence based on this ratio that we have. And if we end up having a relationship where there's more negative events, 5 negative events for every positive event, then those relationships can't stay together, because the emotional being in our body tags that relationship as too painful. And we avoid those relationships. We pull away from those. And eventually they'll collapse in some way, shape, or form. So we tag our relationships, right? And you can tell this because your heart either lifts or sinks when you encounter people. But we probably haven't thought that we can proactively transform relationships ourselves. Because when a relationship has moved into a critical mode, then the people are in their defensive structures. And if we can help evolve that relationship to the green brain, right, rather than the red brain, then we're working with a whole nother brain with this person that we're interacting with. So it's helpful as we go through this for you to think about somebody that you know that you would like to cultivate a stronger relationship with, somebody that you care about, that you would like to feel closer to. And we're going to go through some different tips, right, to help us, 7 in particular, 7 wisdoms about skillful ways, skillful knowledge about relationships, that once we know it, we can proactively use this information. Just like once you know that it's better for you to take a deeper breath, and that breathing shallowly will activate the sympathetic system and make your body feel like you're anxious, and then your body will tell your mind that you're anxious. And instead, we can counter this by training ourselves to breathe more deeply. So can we also transform our relationships by shifting a negative tag to a positive tag. You can even transform a negative relationship. So quick point, because we will look at things like dealing with conflict and being assertive as we go down the road after the break. So we'll return to this point later. But does this mean all interactions? No. Gottman also found that relationships also needed not necessarily a conflict, but a sort of different point of view about every 8 to 1. So every 8 interactions, we need an experience of a different point of view for relationships to feel fresh and dynamic, right? So it's not that we want to go be yes people to each other and overly conforming. It's not that, but rather we want to keep the emotional valence of the relationship in a positive direction. That's the idea. Okay, so we'll talk about conflict later, but a real key to conflict and a huge thing that I really needed to learn was that we can engage in conflict while respecting the other person. Because when we get in conflict, we go straight into the defensive structures of the brain, the amygdala hijack. We get very overly protective of the self and defensive of the self. And then we push away because of defensive of the self. But we can learn that we can take care of the self without activating all those defensive and really kind of aggressive push away structures. So that's something that we can evolve over time. We'll talk more about this when we look at conflict. directly. So Gottman identified what he called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And these are 4 things that we do in relationships that mess them up. So we'll run through those. And they are, in brief, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. And we'll talk about what we can do instead. And then we'll talk about 7 ways that specific things that we can do to strengthen our relationships. The first is criticism. There's lots of criticism that goes on amongst people. And the reason why we're hypercritical of each other is because of the negativity bias of the brain, which works externally too. So we look, especially with people that were around for a long time, because of hedonic adaptation, which means we get used to good stuff and we take it for granted, which is one of the ways that we're adaptable. The positive one side of that on the yin yang is that it makes us adaptable. The negative side is that we take things for granted. So we want to counter that tendency to take things for granted. And along with taking things for granted, because of the negativity bias, it's really easy for us to overfocus on the negative about the other people in our life. Super easy. And then because the default mode network is all about you, me, it's focusing on me and what I want, what I need, and it really has a kind of a narcissistic edge to it that we want to sort of merge out of being so influenced by that to a larger, bigger picture, right? Salience network, bigger picture view, which is a more realistic appraisal than being narrowed into the small me. We're having a bigger picture view now. So criticism is attacking the character of a person. So my husband leaves a bunch of clothes on the floor and he does it regularly for a while. And I'm like, why do you have to be so lazy? That's attacking the character. And ironically, it also tends to perpetuate, because people need to feel good about themselves. It perpetuates them being lazy because they'll push back. Instead of criticism, where we're attacking somebody's who they are, how they are, we instead go into it masters a relationship will instead complain. And what they mean by complain is that you will call attention to what's bugging you, but you don't make it like it's a big character flaw of the person. Instead, it's like, I find it frustrating when there's clothes left on the floor because I'm trying to keep everything neat. Do you think you could help out with that? Which is totally different from you're so lazy, you're such a slob, right? Or you're this. So we want to get away from character assassination criticisms and instead allow ourselves to articulate what's going on. A real life scenario is that I had the house all clean for my mom coming up for dinner. And my husband likes to do his paperwork on the kitchen table and he spreads it all around. He likes to leave it spread out for him to start working on the next morning. I loved seeing the kitchen table clean. So I got him a little basket. And instead of going, why do you have to always put things all over the kitchen table? You're so messy, right? Instead, I could say, hey, hon, it was so fun seeing the kitchen table all neat. Just made me feel like I was on top of things. How would you feel about putting your stuff in this basket at the end of the day? And he's much less likely to push away against that, right? And it doesn't mean that all of our complaints are going to be instantly responded to positively, but we sort of steer the ship in an increasingly positive direction, building what's called emotional money in the bank. And it's that emotional money in the bank. And what they mean by emotional money is positive feelings between the two people that enables us to handle things where we disagree. Okay, so this is some examples of a complaint versus a criticism. Why don't you remember anything versus there's no gas in the car. We talked about keeping it full. What do you think? Did you forget? And one of the things that's in this phrase here that I really appreciate that I didn't write down on this PowerPoint, but should be here, is giving the person the benefit of the doubt. Because of the negativity bias, a long time ago, I was told a phrase, which is, what is that? How does that phrase go? It's if somebody does something that makes you upset and our mind goes, it's either stupidity or malevolence, meaning it's either ignorance, they didn't realize what they're doing in the way and how it affects everybody, or they have an evil intent. And we want to steer away from presuming evil intent. We want to move toward giving people the benefit of the doubt, right? So the did you forget phrase is a benefit of the doubt phrase. And it shows that you're not condemning the person. One of the things I learned early in therapy was, say you have two chairs, say this is, my hands are a chair, and we're each in a chair, and the chairs, we're going to, by the way we communicate with each other, the chairs are going to move closer or they're going to move further apart, so that we can attune to how we phrase things and try to see if we can phrase things away, including things where we're asserting ourselves, in ways that bring those chairs closer together rather than makes the person want to push away against you, right? Here, why do you keep putting your friends ahead of me? I always come out last on your list. Criticism versus, we agreed that we would talk before. And notice how they're saying something tender here. I wanted to spend time alone with you tonight, or I was really hoping we could spend some time together tonight, which evokes tenderness in the other person instead of just defensiveness, and is really getting to the bottom of what this person is trying to say, right? This person here is making them wrong for not doing it. And this one is expressing a complaint. I was hoping that this would happen, but adding a little bit of tenderness about it. And notice that over here, we have, you never asked me how my day was. I always ask about you. Don't you even care anymore? So this is pigeonholing the person into a corner and saying, and essentially, anytime you can replace a sentence with what's wrong with you, what's wrong with you? Don't you care about me anymore? What's wrong with you? Then you want to change the sentence, and you want to change the perspective behind the sentence, because you want to shift the attitude toward care, which is what you really want, right? With that person. So could we talk about my day? Or would you be up for listening to how my day went, right? Instead of just immediately condemning. So we can explore ways to try to express ourselves without doing a character assassination. Now, the second horseman is defensiveness. And this was one that I had a lot of. I didn't have to deal so much with being critical, but I did have a lot of defensiveness. I had a hypersensitivity, and one of the things that mindfulness can help us become aware of are the areas in our lives where we have a bit of sensitivity, where there are hot spots in us, where we got dosed with a little bit too much of that when we were young. It grooved in on a negativity bias when we're young. And so when it happens now, we inflame up really fast, right? And defensiveness was one of them. So when my partner would say something critical, what I perceived to be critical, I would blow up. So one of the things that I learned was to be able to take a step back. First of all, mindfulness gave me the space that when I was starting to feel upset inside over those kinds of things, what I would do instead of focusing my attention outward was bring my attention back inward to self-soothe, to calm down myself. And I might even take a time out and say, hey, I need to take a break because I'm starting to feel upset over what you said. Can we talk about it in a little bit, like half hour, 10 minutes, whatever. And then back to the mantra, as I really want myself to feel better. I really want myself to feel good, because me feeling good has a ripple effect to the outer world, right? So really caring about that and helping to shift, but then being able to be open. And, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to not have any flaws. It's good for me to have flaws. I had to shape shift an old belief system I had from childhood, from being overly, feeling unfairly criticized, that I don't have to feel unfairly criticized. I can have flaws and not feel so sensitive and tender about them. So finding a small piece to take responsibility for honors the other person and diffuses the situation. So, I come to my husband and say something about all that paperwork. And I noticed that at first he felt a little defensive. Well, I really like to have it out in the morning. So that was his little bit defensive, because then I'm ready to work on it. And I say, I know you do. And I know you're so good at keeping up on your stuff that way. But I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind putting it in the basket, helping me out that way. And he's like, it is kind of messy on the table. So now he's taking responsibility for the small piece. Yeah, it is kind of messy on the table. I could see how you would like to have it tucked away. You see, so we're gentling our conversations. We're treating each other with a deeper level of honoring and respect, rather than smashing at each other. So these are skillful insights. The third one is contempt. Now, contempt is actually physically harmful. Contempt has a facial expression of disdain. It actually, where one part of the lip is curled up, and often comes with an eye roll. And it doesn't mean when somebody playfully eye rolls, or an occasional eye roll is contempt. But contempt, you'll know it when you're feeling too much contempt in a relationship, because you'll start to feel sick. It is superiority, it's dislike, and it's incredibly damaging. And the single most predictive tool or expression of a relationship that's going to fracture, because a relationship cannot stand a person who's treating another person with contempt, which is, I smugly feel superior to you and I don't even like you. That's the message that they're signaling. And it's unhealthy. So this is the kind of situation where, if you're experiencing that in a relationship on a regular basis, this is a kind of scenario where it'd be good to work with somebody to talk through how to finesse that particular situation, because it's a very difficult thing to be around. We always have the three ways we can respond to a situation, either by changing it or accepting it, right? Or leaving it. So those are the three different things, getting away from it. So we will have to make a decision about how to work with that if we're dealing with a regular amount of contempt. But we can also learn to not express contempt to others. But because of the negativity bias, and that we're all annoying to each other because of our differences, we have a sort of a part of us that wants everybody to be like ourselves. Wouldn't the world be boring if it was? So because of that, it's easy to build up negativity toward people. But we want to avoid moving into the space of contempt. It's physically damaging for the person. It causes them actually to get physically sick. It reduces immune system function, and we know this for a fact. And then the fourth one is stonewalling. People stonewall, cut each other off, stop communicating because they have become flooded, as a general rule, meaning they're experiencing an amygdala hijack in the brain and they can't think anymore. If our heart rate goes to 100 beats, more than 100 beats a minute, we're flooded. We are in fight or flight, and we don't have access to the higher portion part of the brain. So a smart thing to do when we get into a stonewall place is take a time out and set a time to return and attend to the conversation. And sometimes my husband and I, when we have some hot spots, it'll take us a couple of days before we're calm enough and we build up enough positive emotional money in the bank to be able to return to that conversation. Because this is in the conflict category, conflict and resolution, we'll talk about that when we look specifically at conflict. But it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing to take a break. It's a really good thing to take a break from harsh conversations. And the idea that you shouldn't go to sleep mad, wrong. You can go to sleep mad, wake up in a better mood and resolve. The point is, get yourself into a better mental space where you have your prefrontal lobes, the higher portion order thinking, executive function part of your brain back on before you return to the conversation. Right? So take a break and get your brain back. And you need to do something. The default mode network will really want to keep stewing on that thing that was bugging us. It's just going to want to churn on that like crazy. And we do not have to succumb to that. We want to say, look, I got it. We'll come back to this, because what's churning? Just the emotional brain. There's no higher order thinking going on in our prefrontal lobes. So we want to break from that and do something that gets our mind off it, fun enough and engaging enough for you that it gets your mind off of it, right? Whether that's whatever it is, a fun walk, playing with your dog, jumping up and down, a run, listening to great music, taking a bath, whatever self-nurturing tool will help shift your brain. And then you can start to reflect on it again when you get your whole brain back. Okay, so we are talking about the 4 horsemen, which I just want to go over them with you, that we want to avoid: criticism, defensiveness. We want to be willing. We want to develop enough security within ourselves that it's okay for us to make a mistake. right? We're not horrified over that somebody points out something we're not good at. And again, we all have tender hot spots, and we do want to be extra gentle with each other's tender hot spots in terms of how skillful we attend to them. And we'll know those because we get inflamed, right? And we'll be vulnerable to being defensive. But we can heal that a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, through self-reassurance and letting ourselves know that it's okay to be imperfect. we get to be a normal human being. Avoiding contempt at all costs, right? It's also damaging for the person feeling contempt, I should say, because that amount of negative vitriolic emotion is toxic. And then stonewalling and how to deal with stonewalling. If a person continually, people have situations that are really tough, like they'll say things like, well, what about if I'm dealing with somebody who continually stonewalls me? And we will talk about this when we get again to conflict and assertion section about, bottom lines in relationships and things like that. But one of the first things I would do before giving up on a relationship where the person is continually stonewalling is I would try the 7 pro tips. I would do these things and see what happens after a bunch of emotional money in the bank is built. So the first part is cultivate friendship. And so one of the best ways you can cultivate friendship is to show interest in the other person and even show excitement when you see them. I mean, one of the simplest ways is to look like you're happy to see the person, look like you're happy to see your roommate when they come in the door, look like you're happy to see your kid, look like you're happy to see your parent, right? And it just takes hey instead of hey, right? So it's like hey or hey. That creates a whole different kind of feeling in the other person. And then maybe every so often, ask them an interesting question about their lives. It shows some curiosity about something that is meaningful to them. One of the most powerful ways to stay really deeply bonded with people is show genuine interest in what they are fascinated by. My husband is really interested in drones. And I am not that interested in drones, but he can't move around much. He can still be a pilot with his drone, so he can still fly. And so he loves to talk about those. So I know that I will make him feel good if I get him talking about drones. And I don't have to enjoy the specifics of the details he goes into about battery strength and yada yada, but I can really enjoy and tune in mindfully to the happiness expressed in his face, in his body, and the uplift of his countenance whenever he starts talking about flying. So we can cultivate by saying, what are your hopes for next in terms of drones? Are you thinking about getting a new drone? Express interest in what interests them, right? So, and what they care about specifically. Get them talking about things they enjoy talking about, because that will make them feel good. And when they feel good, they tag the relationship as feeling good. And if you're not fascinated with the subject, become fascinated with the beauty of this person showing happiness talking about this subject, because that's what you care about, is their heart, right? And then the second is, this can't be emphasized enough, is nurture fondness and admiration, offset that negativity bias, offset the tendency to think that, to focus on the negative. A husband has paperwork all over the table. We're still working on getting it in the basket, but there's 100 things he does beautifully well, 100 ways he takes good care. And so paying attention to those, noticing those. You can even make a game of it. I'm going to notice 5 things I like about my roommate today, or 5 things I like about my parents today. I'm just going to notice those. And then this is a wonderful exercise. Make it a habit every day to express appreciation, express particular appreciation. You can say, thank you so much for, I really appreciated it when you are so thoughtful, kind, handsome, whatever kind of terms you want to use. But every single day, you could even set a particular time every day to send a text. 2:00 every day, you're going to send a text to this person and say, hey, I was thinking about you and how great you are at blank, right? And try to say something specific, because specific things are more meaningful to us. How kind it was for you to pick up dinner last night, or how I really appreciated you taking the dog for a walk at 10 p.m., right? When I really didn't feel like it, right? Training our mind to offset the negativity bias. And it's called a bias because it's wrong, it's inaccurate, it's not the truth. So we want to move toward having a more truthful, realistic relationship with our lives. So tuning in and scanning for the positives is a big one. Being supportive. A segue on that is that one thing to keep in your back pocket is to remember that it's not our job to fix other people. In fact, they will resent us if we take on that job. So trying to solve their problems for them, instead of solving their problems for them, we want to affirm their ability to solve their problems, affirm their courage, their strength, their wisdom, their insight, their determination, their focus, right? And then it's not our job. And in romantic relationships, you don't want to turn into the mother or the father, because you don't want to be the nagging parent, because that will, nothing faster will erode your sex drive than, or sex life, than becoming the mother or father in a relationship. Because nobody wants to sleep with their mother or father. So, you've got the unconscious brain with all its associations, and you don't want to be overly associated in that person's unconscious with their parent. So more time on what's right than what's wrong. And this is something that we'll look over at again in the conflict section. But one of the things that we can ask ourselves is, can I let go of being right? There's a great phrase, pick your battles, because we can only, a relationship can only stand so many. So letting go and using the trash can tool for what you can, right? Other people don't like to be made to feel wrong. So the dance is really letting go of being right, finding ways for both people to be right. Okay. Releasing power struggles. Now, this is a big one, turning toward, and particularly with our techno-saturated culture where we have such interesting things going on the phone all the time, right? It's like we walk into an amusement park every time we turn on our phone. So people make what's called bids for attention. So they reach out in some way. They might say, oh my gosh, it's snowing outside, and your partner's in the living room. And that is a kind of bid for connection. That's sharing something. And so the partner in the living room doesn't have to pop up and look out the window, but they could say, wow, it sure is, rather than ignoring them, saying nothing, or right? See, so we have 3 ways that we can respond to bids that we make with each other for connection. One of them is to turn toward. And the turning toward doesn't have to mean that you pop up and get right next to them. It could just be responding in an affirmative way, letting them know that you're tuned in. There's turning away, right, which is ignoring or not paying attention. And then there's turning against, which is actually making some kind of hostile or critical or negative comment. Why do you always have to interrupt me when I'm working? Would be an example of turning against, when someone's just trying to share that it's snowing outside, right? They're experiencing a moment of delight. So we want to avoid turning against, and we want to turn toward as much as we can. And we can all notice those times, become mindful of those times when we're not paying as much attention. Sometimes we usually turn against when we're feeling stressed or pressured, right? So a bid is a request for connection, and you probably are getting more bids than you realize. Most people are getting more bids for attention than they realize. Somebody texts you, you get a call, any little kind of note, and you can also reach out with bids for connection and turn toward people more often rather than turn away or withdraw or hibernate, by reaching out to those you've known, people you've known before, trying things like clubs. Now they found that turning toward, now this would be what kind? What would this be? Turning toward, turning away, or turning against? What do you think? Quiz question. Type the answer in the chat. Turning toward, turning away, or turning against? What is he doing? Yeah, exactly. You guys got it. Exactly right. He's turning away. He's just basically ignoring and not responding. So couples that stay together turn toward, respond to each other's bids, not perfectly, but almost 90% of the time, whereas couples that didn't stay together did not turn toward each other's bids very well. So you can see how powerful this is at creating a positive emotional valence in your relationship. Now, this is another one I really had to work on, and that is allow yourself to be influenced. Those of us with strong egos, have to learn to gentle ourselves and be a little bit more open. So this is showing that you're open to the other person's ideas rather than being a roadblock or immediately shutting down. So someone says something like, hey, it would be so cool if we could get a futon in the living room. And maybe you don't want to get a futon in the living room, but you don't immediately shut it down. You open the conversation. You learn a little bit more about what's behind that. My son and I had a game that we played that was really helpful with this, called the scale of 1 to 10. And so one person says that they want something, and the other person says, okay, how important is it to you on a scale of 1 to 10? And if it's a 10 important, then you really pay attention. If it's an 8, 9, or 10, if it's a 6 or 7, it's like, I don't really want to, and it's only a 6 or 7, so can we let it go this time? But if it's an 8, 9, or 10, then we really want to tune in, right? And say, tell me more about this, and open up to the conversation rather than shutting things down. You can see this happening a lot with parents and kids, right? Kinds of relationships where one person or the other shuts the other person's ideas down. And with healthy relationships, the people feel that things that they're interested in trying, the other person shows some receptivity. You can see here that 81% divorce rates when people don't share power. And this is a kind of sharing of power. I'm interested in this, you're interested in that. How are we going to work out that power? And that brings us into that conflict resolution domain again, which we'll do a focused class on. But we do need to be willing to share power. And one great way to do that is to show curiosity and openness. Tell me a little bit more about why this is important to you. What is it that you're thinking? So express interest. Find ways to play. You may be surprised to learn that play bonds. We get bonding neurochemicals, oxytocin, when we play. And play includes things like laughter. Play with physical movement is particularly bonding. Play with physical movement in a novel, new experience is mega bonding. So if you really want to bond with somebody, go do an adventure with them, something really adventuresome, something new and different, because it'll stimulate tons of dopamine and oxytocin, which bonds and connects us and makes us feel good about each other. Excitement. This is why even in negative environments like war, that you have the brotherhood that is developed because of the harshness of the situation, that bonding that comes through even the experience of trauma. So, but it's better for our relationships to bond through joy, through fun, through play. And these can be silly things that you do, and small little rituals like fist bump, or a parting ritual like love ya as somebody walks out the door, which you can just start doing out of the blue. You can just start a ritual. Hey, can't wait to see you when you get home, or whatever, and just start saying it every time when they go, and let it develop into a ritual, or give someone a hug before they leave or before bed. And it doesn't matter if you don't have a ritual now. Start a ritual. Just pick one and just start it. Just start doing it on a regular basis. And it serves as a kind of glue, a bonding glue between the two of you, right? And these can be just momentary things that just take a second or two that really create closeness in us. But finding ways to play is very powerful. Remember, we want to build up those positive experiences with each other. And then this is one of my favorites. I love this one. Find your points of connection. So I like to draw a star, and then I think about a person. And my mom and I have lots of points of connection, but this really helps me when I'm going to go spend time with somebody and I'm like, what are we going to, I don't really know what we're going to talk about, like a relative I don't know that well, or someone that I think I don't have that much in common. And what connects us, what helps us deal with the things that we disagree with on, are developing cohesion on the things that we have in common. That's why when you see shows where they're trying to talk down, say, hostage negotiators are trying to negotiate with someone who's taken hostages, what they try to do is find a point of connection, something that they have in common, because that's how the relationship is built. So it's all about that. They don't use power force over that, creates a Waco situation. Instead, they use connection. That negotiator is a master at finding points of connection between themselves and the person who is taken the hostages. So you just write down things you have in common that you both enjoy doing, right? And whatever, it doesn't have to be that you fill in all 5 stars, but it gives you an anchor point for you to focus on with that person so that you can attune with each other and do these things together, and make sure you talk about them together and cultivate them together, right? So while I'm not that into drones, flying drones like my husband is, we are very into going outside to parks together while we do that, right? To fresh environments. So sometimes it may not be like, you may not like shopping, but you like walking, and your mom likes shopping. So you take her shopping and you get to walk, right? So you find these points. Sometimes it's a 2-step to get to the point of connection, but you can find them. And it's really valuable to know them and cultivate them with each other. And then truly listening. Now, this is the mindful exercise for the week that I want to encourage us all to drop into. Let's take a breath. And it's really nice when we listen to practice the heart rate variability breathing, that longer out breath, that anchoring the breath down into the lower part of the body. So we're breathing from our abdomen, we're breathing from our chi center, right? We're breathing in and out stability and strength from that center. But we have the 3 level, we have the not listening, not tuned in at all, sort of they're talking, but we're somewhere else. There's banter listening, and banter listening isn't bad. It's good. It's where they say something, you say something right away, back and forth. And while they're talking, you're thinking about things to say, right? And banter listening is fun to do with friends and get in a rapport and go back and forth, but we don't want to only banter listen. We also want to give deep attentional listening, where we drop in and we give them our whole presence, and we're not composing a response at the same time. It's an extraordinary gift to give somebody when you really just tune in and give them your full presence. It is a beautiful gift, and they completely feel it. And I want to encourage everybody to have at least a couple of moments of deep listening during this break, maybe even one a day if you can swing it. And this child from the toolbox shares truly deep listening beautifully with the idea that you put your eyes to their eyes, your ears to their ears, and your heart to their heart, which gives us a set of very specific steps to follow in order to experience deep listening. So let's listen to him share this with us. That's funny. Okay. I see. I'm trying to click on the speaker.
If you just doze.
Okay, here we go.
It's kind of a motto for the classrooms. Listen with your eyes, ears, and heart. You put your eyes to their eyes and your ears to their ears and your heart to their heart, and you talk to them and communicate. If you're just dozing around like this, they think that you're listening because you're not paying attention. When you look someone in the eyes, they know that you're listening. And when you listen with your heart, that means you're really connecting and really feeling it, really feeling what they're saying.
So the ears and eyes is doing their job. They listen and the eyes look, but the heart is taking all that information. And when it comes to your heart, then the brain knows what to do.
The main idea of your heart, that you're listening with every part if you're listening with your heart. The heart is like the most important thing you have to listen with.
I listen to the brain when that's a project, but when I should be listening to the heart and then I'm still locked into the brain, that's a big fat problem.
You just really listen and, your heart's facing them and you just think about what they're saying. If your eyes and your brain, too, I think, and your heart is focused on them, you can fully really understand what they're saying.
So your eyes to their eyes, your ears to theirs, your heart to their heart. I mean, how beautiful is that? So deep listening. And remembering to wait for the caboose. Deep listening and breathing. Add that breath. While you're listening with your heart, you can breathe deeply. And listen for the caboose. Wait until the end of what they're saying. See if the train of thought has finished, which is a really great metaphor that helps me cut people off. Helps me not cut people off. Sorry. So small things often, doing these little things frequently are what build emotional money in the bank. We can change the trajectory, the path of our relationships simply by doing these small little loving things every day. And this all builds emotional money in the bank. So when we have a strong emotional bank account, when people feel good about the relationship, that's when we're able to successfully resolve conflict, which we'll talk about after the break. So by way of closing, and I can't believe I'm on time this time, by way of closing, what is your favorite pro tip that you want to practice this week? What is the ones? And I encourage you to practice them all. So I'm going to run through them again really quick for you. Remember the magic relationship ratio, which is 5 positive experiences, just doing the math, counting, making sure you offset those negative ones because we're offsetting the negativity bias. We're creating positive emotional valence in our relationship. So both of us tag that relationship emotionally when we think about it with a really good feeling. If we have a lot of negative interactions, we tag it as negative. And it doesn't mean we have to be always on the same page because variety is the spice of life, right? But at least 5-1. And then we want to avoid these 4 things: criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. Trade criticism for complaining, get away from the condemning the person's character, which really pulls us away. There's some examples. Allow ourselves to be imperfect. It's okay for me to be imperfect. I'm good even if I'm imperfect. It's a great thing to say when somebody starts saying within yourself, go straight into self-soothing. It's okay for me to be imperfect when somebody starts criticizing you. And then contempt, and see if you can own a little piece of it. Right? They may be exaggerating, but can you own, yeah, I do keep my car a little messy. You're right. And that sort of deflates the balloon, right? And so there's where you're going to go with that. Then avoid contempt and give some time when you're experiencing flooding and let yourself get into another situation. Recognize that you don't have your whole brain. And so there's no point. There's really no point. Things will just spiral down if you don't take a break. And set the time that you'd like to return. And if you're not ready, then set another time, right? Let it take what it takes. And then we have cultivating the friendship by showing genuine interest in the other person. Really letting them know that you care by showing that you care about what they care about and that you're aware of what they care about and you're curious about what they care about. The next one is nurture fondness and admiration by scanning the environment. Be a good searcher for what's good. Strengthen the good, affirm the good, help it get bigger and stronger by affirming the good, focusing more on that rather than on succumbing to the negativity bias part of our brain, which is going to go, well, it's inconvenient for me that they do this and I don't like that they do this. That's also inconvenient for me. And we sort of pull away from this kind of default selfishness that we're all vulnerable to, and make it a daily habit to express appreciation, admiration, gratitude, support. Remember that we don't need to fix another. They can fix themselves. Let them have the power to fix themselves. They have the power to do that. That's what everybody's life journey is all about. So we don't have to point out their mistakes. Who feels close to somebody who's always pointing out their mistakes? And we can let go of pick your battles is really the way to do this one. Let go of the small stuff. The next one is turning toward, noticing bids and responding to them by turning toward as best you can. You don't have to have a perfect track record, but doing it more often than not will definitely set up positive emotional valence in your relationship. Allow yourself to be influenced and curious about why the other person wants to do things a certain way, and avoid shutting it down right away. No. I used to say that all the time to my husband. He'd say, hey, how about we put these pictures over here? And I used to go, no, because I would be like, no, I don't like the way that, but instead it's like, well, what are you thinking of when you do that? I give him a little time to talk before I say no. And maybe probably say no a lot less also. Find ways to play. This is super important. And connected to that is find your points of connection. Be aware of things that you have in common that you can flourish and use to flourish. Truly listening, using our eyes, our ears, and our heart, listening from our heart and allowing ourselves to just sort of drop in and breathe deeply, calmly, establishing that low idol of sort of, it's called the bliss idol. So in yoga. So, and then waiting for the caboose, using the listening tool and let the person really taking them in. And, you don't have to just listen to the words. You can also you can do wide eyes and enjoy another perceptual experience of their face and their emotions and their being. You can take them in. Okay. Small things often, doing a lot of these little things on a regular basis can transform relationships. It builds emotional money in the bank, which is what enables us to deal successfully with conflict, is having that positive emotional foundation. And your favorite pro tip. So I see that you're saying you really like nurturing fondness and admiration. That's a beautiful thing. And you can just pick one to focus on for a while. And when you got that one down, when that one's part of your routine, you can grab another one and practice that one and make that part of your routine. Emotional valence, cultivating emotional valence and really listening. Good one. Oh, I liked sharing these in the discussion posts. Excellent, everyone. Okay, great. Thank you all. So that's our talk for today. I hope you have let's all take a breath. Let it sink in. I want to express my gratitude for you. Really appreciate that you come and join and spend this time with me. It's very special to me. I wish you all, I've been learning to overcome my phobia of video with you. So thank you for that. And I wish you all a really wonderful, restful, rejuvenating, joyful spring break. So I'll close the recording.